My name is Elena Park, though most people just call me Lena. I am 34 years old, and last Wednesday night, while standing barefoot in the cramped kitchen of my one-bedroom apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina, my entire life tilted on its axis. I had stopped at a gas station on Glenwood Avenue earlier in the day, grabbed a Diet Coke, a pack of gum, and, on a whim, a $5 lottery ticket. It wasn't unusual. I bought one maybe once a month, usually forgetting about it until the numbers had already been drawn. But this time was different. I sat at the little round table I'd inherited from my grandmother, unfolded the ticket, and began checking the numbers against my phone screen. The first matched. My breath caught. Then the second, then the third. By the time all six aligned, my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the ticket onto the floor like it had burned me. I bent to pick it up, smoothed the creases with trembling fingers, and stared again just to be sure I hadn't hallucinated. No mistake. 6 perfect numbers. A jackpot of $52 million. The initial shock should have been euphoria, but instead it was something sharper, almost frightening. I'd never held more than a few thousand in savings at any point in my life. My annual salary as a mid-level accountant at a logistics firm barely touched $60,000 before taxes. Now I was staring at more money than my entire family tree had ever seen combined. For the first few minutes, I couldn't breathe. But then, as the adrenaline settled into a steady hum, another thought crystallized, cold and clear. I would tell no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even my closest friend. No one could know, at least not yet. If you've ever had a secret so big you felt it might explode if you said it out loud, you know the weight I carried that night. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. You'll want to hear what happened next because, trust me, this secret wasn't just about money. It was about survival. Before that night, my life had been simple, ordinary, even painfully predictable. I lived alone in a modest apartment on the edge of 5 Points, surrounded by mismatched thrift store furniture I had tried to make look intentional. Each morning, I woke at 6 on the dot, brewed coffee in a machine that sputtered louder with each passing year, and scrolled through emails before heading into the office. My job was steady but thankless. I spent most days correcting other people's mistakes in spreadsheets, reconciling invoices that didn't line up, or chasing coworkers who forgot deadlines. I was good at it, dependable, efficient, but no one noticed unless I slipped. Recognition was a currency I rarely saw, and I learned early not to expect it. My family, however, was a different kind of battlefield. My parents divorced when I was 13, and both remarried quickly. My father, Daniel, a high school physics teacher, married Sharon, a realtor with manicured nails and an obsession with lakefront properties. My mother, May, married Victor, a businessman whose favorite hobby was reminding everyone how hard he had worked for his success. Then there were my siblings. My older brother, Aaron, now 36, brilliant but restless, drifting from job to job and relationship to relationship, perfecting the art of borrowing without returning. And my younger sister, Julia, 30 years old, Ivy League diploma in hand, married to Ethan, a surgeon, and living in a house so pristine it could have been staged by a magazine. Around the edges of that picture were my aunts. Rosa, my mom's younger sister, a librarian at an underfunded public school who lived in a tiny apartment stuffed with books and plants. She never had much, but she was the only one who showed up consistently for birthdays, graduations, bad days when I needed someone. And then Valerie, my dad's older sister, married wealthy and never let us forget it. She criticized everything, my job, my apartment, my single status, as though picking me apart confirmed her own superiority. Her son, Chase, had inherited her sense of entitlement, but none of her financial cushion. Instead, he gambled away what little he had, and the family kept looking the other way. For years, I'd been the one who bent, who gave, who filled the gaps when someone else came up short. When Aaron swore he needed money for rehab, I drained my savings account, only to discover later he never went. When Julia needed help paying for her wedding costs, I put $2,000 on my credit card she never repaid. When Dad's roof supposedly needed urgent repairs, I wired money only to see vacation photos from Cancun a month later. I knew the pattern. I was the fallback, the family's financial safety net, even though I barely had enough for myself. The irony was cruel, and it wasn't lost on me. That's why, staring at that golden ticket in my hand, one thought cut through everything else. If they found out, they'd see me as a walking ATM. Not a daughter. Not a sister. Not a niece. Just a number with legs. I'd be pulled into every problem, every excuse, every manipulation, and my life would no longer be mine. The money didn't scare me. What terrified me was what the people I loved would become once they smelled it. I poured myself a glass of cheap red wine that night, the kind I usually saved for weekends, and sat by the window listening to the hum of traffic below. My mind spun, leaping between fantasies and fears. A house without peeling paint. Paying off the last of my student loans. Traveling somewhere, anywhere, outside the country for the first time. But then darker thoughts crept in. What would Aaron say if he knew? How fast would Julia and Ethan calculate how much of it should go toward their kids' private school tuition? Would Mom ask for a loan for yet another kitchen remodel, or would Dad frame it as a lesson in sharing? No, I decided. Silence was safety. Secrecy was survival. I would claim the money through legal channels that allowed anonymity. I would hire a lawyer. I would set up structures so airtight even my own family couldn't pry through. And most importantly, I would not breathe a word of it until I was ready. That decision didn't just change the trajectory of my life, it set me on a path I hadn't anticipated. Because the truth was, I wasn't just going to hide the money. I was going to use it to see who my family really was when they thought I had nothing left. When you grow up in a family where love is measured by what you provide, you begin keeping a silent ledger in your head. Not because you want to, but because every interaction feels like a transaction. By the time I was in my early 20s, I already knew my role. I was useful only when I could give. Looking back now, it's painful to admit, but the signs were always there. I still remember the first big loan. My father called one Tuesday evening, his voice unusually strained. The roof at the house is leaking, Lena. Insurance won't cover the full repair. I just need a little help, just a loan, of course. I'll pay you back when my bonus comes through. At the time, I was barely making $42,000 a year at my first accounting job. But when your father asks, you don't hesitate. I transferred $5,500, promising myself it was temporary. 3 months later, I saw him post photos from a vacation in Cancun with Sharon, cocktails in hand, smiling under palm trees. When I brought up the repayment gently, his expression turned wounded. We raised you, didn't we? Sometimes family gives without keeping score. That line stung because it wasn't true. My family always kept score. Just not in my favor. The next entry in the ledger belonged to Julia. She had always been the golden child. Ivy League graduate, married to a surgeon, kids in private school. But even perfection carried a price tag. Lena, she whispered over the phone one night, Paul and I are drowning in wedding expenses. Could you help? Just $2,000. We'll pay you back after the honeymoon. I said yes, of course. I put it on my credit card, interest piling up month after month. 5 years later, I was still waiting. In that time, Julia bought a new Audi, redid her kitchen, and posted 3 separate sets of photos from Disney vacations. The wedding debt vanished into silence. Then came Aaron. My brother had always been charming, the kind of man who could talk a cop out of a ticket or a professor into granting an extension. But charm had soured into manipulation long ago. 3 years back, he called in tears, claiming he needed $6,000 for rehab. He swore this was his last chance, his turning point, that I was saving his life. I wired the money, drained my savings and clung to hope. A month later, I learned from a friend he had never checked into rehab. The money was gone, wasted on a doomed business idea and a girlfriend who disappeared when the cash dried up. It wasn't just immediate family. Aunt Valerie, with her flawless hair and sharp tongue, knew exactly how to slice deep. At Christmas one year, she leaned in, voice syrupy, and said, "Still renting that little place, Lena? Don't you think it's time you invested properly?" Her son, Chase, chuckled from the couch, beer in hand. That same winter, he cornered me in the kitchen, muttering about a surefire casino bet. He asked for $1,000, just a little favor. That time I refused, but the entitlement stayed with me. The only exception, the only person who ever gave without expectation, was Aunt Rosa. She lived in a cramped apartment off Hillsborough Street, books stacked taller than furniture. She never had much, but she always showed up. Birthdays, graduations, even the quiet days when I needed someone. She slipped me $20 bills in envelopes labeled for groceries and hugged me tightly, whispering, "Don't tell anyone." She had nothing to spare, yet she gave anyway. Not for recognition. Not for repayment. Just because she cared. My ledger grew thick with unspoken debts. Julia's bathroom remodeled disguised as a plea for help. Dad's emergency car payment that turned into a weekend fishing trip. Aaron's endless cycle of desperate calls. Each time I said yes, I shrank a little smaller. I told myself it was normal, that family meant sacrifice, that one day the balance would tilt back my way. But the truth was, it never did. Every yes I gave was another deposit into their accounts and another withdrawal from my own dignity. So when I held that winning ticket, 6 perfect numbers, I realized I hadn't just gained money. I had gained clarity. For years, I had been their patch, their safety net, their ATM with a beating heart. But now, with millions secured behind a slip of paper, I wasn't going to play that role anymore. I was going to flip the ledger. Because money doesn't only buy things, it tests things. And I was ready to test everyone in my family. If they thought I was broke, if they believed I had nothing left, who would show up? Who would make excuses? Who would laugh? It wasn't about dramatic revenge or public shame. It was quieter than that, colder. It was about truth. I wasn't going to announce my millions. Instead, I would tell them the opposite, that I was broke, unemployed, barely hanging on. And then I would ask for help. Not an impossible sum, just $5,000. Enough to be uncomfortable, but not outrageous. Enough to draw out their true selves. I rehearsed the story until it felt natural. The company collapsed after an embezzlement scandal. Severance delayed. Medical bills piling up. Rent coming due. Plausible, sympathetic, hard to ignore. I would ask, then wait in silence. And their answers would tell me everything. When you decide to test your family, it feels a little like lighting a match in a dark room. You don't know if you'll see warmth or destruction, but you know something will be revealed. I had rehearsed my story so many times it no longer sounded like a lie. I even believed parts of it myself. The collapsed company, the delayed severance, the medical bills stacking up. The words rolled off my tongue as if they were memories instead of fabrications. I decided to start with my mother. If anyone would show compassion, surely it would be her. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. I dialed her number on a rainy Thursday evening, pacing my apartment as I held the phone to my ear. She picked up on the third ring, distracted as always. "Lena, I was just about to head out with Warren. Can we make this quick?" My throat tightened. I told her about the company shutting down, the paycheck that never arrived, the hospital bills from recent tests. I asked, gently but directly, if she could help me cover rent with $5,000. There was a pause long enough for me to hear the faint click of her car keys in the background. "Oh, honey, that's terrible," she said. "But you know Warren and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We're strapped right now. Have you asked your father? Or maybe Julia, Paul makes good money, doesn't he?" My chest ached as she pushed the responsibility elsewhere. She didn't say no outright, but her answer was clear enough. "I'll talk to Warren and see," she added, her tone shifting to polite dismissal. I knew I'd never hear back. The next day, I met my father for coffee. He greeted me with a weary sigh, like I had already disappointed him just by sitting down. I told him the same story, voice low and unsteady. He listened with that detached, teacher-like expression he always wore when he thought he was imparting wisdom. When I asked for the loan, he leaned back, crossing his arms. "Lena, I've always told you, save 6 months of expenses. Live below your means. This is what happens when you don't prepare." His voice cut sharp. "Stephanie and I are focused on retirement. Dipping into those funds would be irresponsible." He patted my hand, as if lecturing me was a form of comfort. Not once did he offer actual help. Julia was next. Her house smelled of espresso and lemon polish, the kind of place where everything looked staged for a magazine. She gasped in all the right places as I told my story, even clasped my hand dramatically. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd surprise me. But then came the hesitation. "This isn't a great time," she said, lowering her eyes. "We just bought the Audi last month and the kids' tuition was due. Plus, we're redoing the bathroom. Paul's strict about the budget, you know how it is. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount." She offered me the guest room instead, as if I could uproot my life to live among her storage boxes. I thanked her, but I already knew her answer was no. Aaron didn't even bother with pretense. I sent him a long message, and his response was a single text: "That sucks. Really tight right now myself. We'll talk later." The call never came. My follow-ups went unanswered. This from the same brother who had drained my savings with promises of recovery and change. The others followed the same pattern. Stephanie, my father's wife, didn't sugarcoat anything. "Lena, you're an adult. If you're struggling, maybe it's time to downsize your apartment or take on roommates. We can't help you financially. It's not wise to throw money at problems." Warren was blunter still. "You're not my responsibility. I've provided for your mother. That's where my obligations end." Chase promised to help, even suggested meeting for lunch to hand me a check. The day came, and an hour before, he canceled. "Something came up. Let's reschedule." We never did. Aunt Valerie didn't disappoint either. She lectured me about how she had warned my father that accounting wasn't stable, then spread my irresponsibility through the family grapevine by the next evening. By the end of the week, my experiment had given me everything I feared: silence, excuses, lectures, and gossip. 7 people who had leaned on me for years, who had emptied my pockets with promises they never intended to keep, had turned away when I needed them. And then came Rosa. She wasn't even on my original list for that week. I was saving her for last, partly because I didn't want to confirm my fears about her too. But she found me first. She called after hearing whispers of my so-called troubles. Her voice was warm, steady, no judgment in it. "Lena, I just heard. Are you all right? Come see me tomorrow. We'll talk." We met at a small diner near her apartment. She ordered coffee and asked questions no one else had thought to ask. "How are you coping? What are you planning next?" After I explained my situation, she didn't hesitate. She reached into her worn purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is $3,000. I know it's not the full 5, but it should cover rent for now. And if you need a place to stay, my sofa pulls out. It's not much, but it's yours." I stared at the envelope, stunned. Rosa, who lived paycheck to paycheck, who worked extra tutoring hours to cover her own bills, had just handed me nearly everything she had. She didn't question if I was telling the truth. She didn't hesitate or calculate what she might lose. She gave, because that's who she was. In that moment, my ledger snapped into sharp focus. My parents, my siblings, my cousins, they all had money, resources, comfort, and they gave me nothing. Rosa had nothing, and she gave me everything. That single gesture told me more than a lifetime of words ever could. When I went home from the diner that night, The envelope of Rose's sacrifice sat heavy in my bag. I didn't even open it. I already knew what was inside: her rent money, her grocery money, the savings she had no business giving me. And she had handed it over without blinking. I sat at my kitchen table staring at it, my chest tight with a mix of gratitude and guilt. Of all the people I had tested, the one who had the least to give was the only one who showed up. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed her words in my head: family helps family. Don't worry about paying it back right away. Her voice wasn't strained, wasn't resentful, wasn't burdened. It was simply kind. She meant it. She would rather go without than watch me stumble. And that's when I knew I couldn't let her carry that weight. She deserved the truth. The next evening, I invited her to my apartment. She showed up in jeans and a cardigan with a button missing, carrying a plastic bag with homemade soup inside. "Thought you could use a meal," she said, setting it on my counter. I poured her tea and tried to steady my hands. "Rosa, I need to tell you something," I began, sitting across from her. She raised her eyebrows, calm and open. "I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I still work there." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "I made up the story to test the family. I wanted to see who would help me if I needed it." Her expression didn't harden the way I expected. She didn't lash out or call me manipulative. She sat quietly for a moment, sipping her tea, then nodded slowly. "I see," she said. "Not angry. Just sad. Sad you felt you had to do that to know the truth." The lump in my throat grew unbearable. "You were the only one who showed up, Rosa. Everyone else had excuses. They either ignored me or lectured me. But you gave me nearly everything you had, and you didn't even think twice. I need you to know something." I reached into the drawer where I had hidden the ticket. I placed it on the table between us. She leaned forward, squinting at it. "What's this?" "I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $47 million. Her eyes widened, but she didn't gasp, didn't reach for it, didn't even smile. She looked at me steadily, waiting for me to continue. "I haven't told anyone. Not my parents, not Julia, not Aaron. You're the first to know. Secret with someone who wouldn't weaponize it." She set her cup down carefully, then reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "That's life-changing," she said softly. "But Lena, don't let it change you." Tears welled in my eyes. "I won't. But I couldn't let you carry the burden you offered me. You gave me money you didn't have because you cared. And that told me more about this family than I could ever have learned otherwise." Rosa smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Money doesn't reveal who others are, Lena. It reveals who we are. How we choose to use it, how we treat people when we have it or when we don't." I squeezed her hand. "Then I want to use it to help you. Your medical bills, your apartment, anything you need. You shouldn't be working yourself to the bone while I sit on millions." She shook her head gently. "I don't need your millions. I'm happy with my life, my students, my books, my little home. Don't confuse gratitude with obligation. Just knowing you're secure and free is enough for me." Her humility broke me. The one person I wanted to shower with comfort refused to treat me like a bank. She wanted nothing, expected nothing. That was real love, unvarnished and unconditional. Later that week, I met with my lawyer again. "I want to set up a trust," I told him. "One for Rosa. Monthly stipend, medical coverage, retirement fund. But structured so it feels like a gift, not charity." She'd hate a lump sum. He nodded, scribbling notes. "And I want to buy her a home. Nothing extravagant. Just something safe, comfortable, close enough that we can see each other every day." For the first time since those numbers had flashed across the TV screen, I felt like I had direction. The money wasn't just sitting in accounts anymore. It had a purpose. Not for the people who laughed at me or scolded me when I needed help, but for the one who had proven her loyalty when it cost her dearly. As I left the lawyer's office that afternoon, the city lights gleamed on wet pavement, and I thought about how strangely freeing the whole test had been. Painful, yes. Devastating, even. but clarifying. My family's true colors had been exposed. And now, armed with both truth and fortune, I had decisions to make. Because sooner or later, they'd come knocking again. And when they did, I wouldn't be the same Lena who said yes out of guilt. I would be the Lena who saw clearly, who had finally stopped buying counterfeit love. The invitation I sent out was simple: family meeting. My apartment. Sunday afternoon. Important news. No details, no hints, just enough to spark their curiosity. Part of me knew they wouldn't come if they suspected confrontation. But curiosity, and maybe the possibility of gaining something, was always a powerful lure in my family. By Sunday, every seat in my small living room was filled. My mother with Warren perched stiffly beside her, my father with Stephanie whispering in his ear, Julia tapping impatiently at her phone, Aaron looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and even Aunt Valerie with her usual frown. Rosa came last, slipping quietly into a chair in the corner, giving me a small smile that grounded me. I stood at the front of the room, my palms sweaty but my voice steady. Thank you all for coming. I know you've heard rumors about my financial situation. I want to clear the air. They shifted in their seats. My mother spoke first. We've been worried, Lena. You should have told us if things were that bad. Her tone was smooth, but I saw the defensiveness in her eyes. I did tell you, I said evenly. I reached out to every one of you. I asked for help. Do you remember what you said? The silence was immediate and heavy. My father cleared his throat. We all have responsibilities, Lena. It's not always possible to. To what? I cut him off. To return the favor? To help the daughter you lectured about responsibility while refusing to lift a finger yourself? To answer a phone call? To lend me what I've lent all of you, time and time again. Julia shifted uncomfortably. You're making us sound like villains. We have kids, mortgages. And I had bills, Julia. Rent. Medical costs. Did that matter to you? Or was your bathroom renovation more urgent than your sister? Aaron muttered something under his breath, but I heard it clearly. You're overreacting. I snapped my gaze to him. Overreacting? You ignored me. Not even a call back, Aaron. Free. Cost you nothing. And yet, silence. But you had no trouble calling me when you needed help last year, did you? The room crackled with tension. No one wanted to meet my eyes. They shifted, fidgeted, muttered excuses. And that's when I let the silence stretch until it hurt. Finally, I said, I want you all to hear me clearly. I will never again be the family safety net. I will not fund your vacations, your cars, your tuition, your dreams. I will not be your ATM. Those days are over. My mother's face tightened. Lena, don't say things you'll regret. I smiled faintly. The only regret I have is not saying them sooner. I reached into my purse, pulled out a small envelope, and laid it on the table. That's $300. My portion of this family meeting, since I assume someone will try to calculate the cost. The rest is on you. Gasps rippled through the room. They knew exactly what I was referencing: the dinner, the bill, the night they laughed at my expense. And in their eyes, I saw it hit. I wasn't playing that role anymore. As they sputtered and argued, I turned to Rosa. Would you stay behind? I'd like your help with something. She nodded. One by one, they left, muttering their justifications, their defenses, their thinly veiled accusations. By the time the door shut behind the last of them, my apartment felt lighter, cleaner, quieter. Rosa helped me clear the cups. You did well, she said softly. For once, I said with a shaky laugh. I wasn't afraid of disappointing them. Because I finally realized it doesn't matter what they think. They never saw me clearly anyway. She squeezed my hand. That's freedom, Lena. That's worth more than all the money in the world. I thought about telling the rest of them the truth, about the lottery, about the fortune secured in trusts and accounts. But as I stood there, I knew I never would. They didn't deserve to know. They didn't deserve to share in something they had proven they couldn't respect. The money had given me peace, yes. But more importantly, the truth had given me clarity. I now knew who was real and who wasn't. Who stayed when I had nothing to offer, and who vanished the moment I needed something in return. That night, Rosa and I sat on my balcony, sipping tea as the city lights shimmered in the distance. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened. I had money in the bank, yes. But more importantly, I had boundaries, dignity, and one genuine connection that mattered more than any dollar amount. I raised my cup in a quiet toast. To freedom, I whispered. Rosa clinked her cup against mine. To freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly home. If you've ever found yourself valued only for what you could provide and not for who you are, I hope my story reminds you that you deserve more. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's respect for yourself. Have you ever had to walk away from family expectations or test someone's loyalty when it mattered most? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and self-discovery, and share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't measured in money, but in who they are. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the greatest act of revenge is learning to live free.